One of the big lies of the SaaS era was that it brought productivity.
Was there a specific moment you realized the playbook you wrote even had an expiration date?
I had a client as fractional CRO in 2023 after I left Chargebee, and it was still early days for the application of AI. When I came back to doing CRO advising, the market had totally changed. To an agent, when you set it on a task, everything, it just like focuses on that task. An LLM is largely a prediction machine.
With all this automation, what human skills become more valuable and not less?
The ability to take signal out of noise. And I think that consistency is another human skill that is more valuable now than before.
Our guest today managed a 250-person hospital in a war zone in Congo for Doctors Without Borders. And then he sat in an Uber pool in San Francisco, met the CEO of Chargebee, and somehow became their first employee outside India. He took that company from 3 salespeople to 150, grew revenue 100x, and increased average selling price by 30x. And now he's helping companies tear apart the very playbook he spent 7 years building and rebuild it with AI. In this episode, Germain breaks down exactly how he engineered one of the SaaS's best GTM machines, including a pricing insight that unlocked 130% net revenue retention. He explains why email is basically dead for outbound, why phones are back, and where AI agents are generally replacing human versus where they completely fall flat. He also drops one of my favorite hot takes I've heard on the show, that SaaS never actually brought productivity, it just delegated work from vendors to customers. And AI might finally fix that. And he built a Chrome extension with Claude that tells him when his prospect go live on LinkedIn. We're going to get him to share that with you. This is Germain Brion on AI GTM WTF. Let's get into it. Thank you, Germain, for being here. My guest today built one of the most impressive GTM machines in SaaS, took Chargebee from 3 salespeople to 150, grew revenue 100x, and I've seen him doing it. And now he's helping companies tear that exact playbook apart and rebuild it with AI. He's also my former boss, so I know where the bodies are buried. Germain, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Raul. Good to see you again.
Likewise. Germain, for people who do not know you, although that is not a possibility, but let's assume there are a few, you went from managing a 250-person hospital in a war zone in Congo for Doctors Without Borders to scaling a SaaS company to $3.5 billion. How in the world did that happen?
Yeah, that's a good question. My mom says, life has more imagination than we do. And I started my career in real estate development and went into finance during the 2008 crisis, had this kind of moment where I felt I needed to have impact and went and worked with Doctors Without Borders in a war zone in the Congo for 8 months, managing a hospital. And when I came back to that, the sort of spreadsheets that I was working on felt somewhat limited in terms of impact. So I started building my first company, which back then in 2010 was going to help kids learn how to navigate the digital world safely, which is a problem that we were early on and surprisingly is still unsolved today. We ran into a bunch of startup issues then. I came to San Francisco after shutting that down in 2015, sat in an Uber pool when we would share rides with other people. And Krish, who you know as the CEO and one of the co-founders of Chargebee, was the other passenger in that Uber pool. And for some surprising reason, after we hit it off and had coffee, he thought I could be a good VP of global sales. So I joined Chargebee as the first employee outside of India. And at the time, the company was 50 people. And as you mentioned, 3 people on the sales team. Stayed until the company was 1,200 people globally, with a lot of fun and some war wounds in the 7 years I spent there as well.
Amazing. I mean, I think the story never gets old. I remember researching about this before I interviewed with you. So you built this incredible human-led GTM engine at Chargebee, and you're a legend for doing that. And now you're helping companies replace parts of that with AI. I want to understand, was there a specific moment you realized the playbook you wrote even had an expiration date?
It's a really interesting I didn't feel it happen when it happened. And it's sort of in hindsight that you start looking at all of a sudden these tools are getting quite good. And so obviously the GPT moment, you sort of realize, okay, writing emails is going to be easy. Writing good emails remains hard. That's always been the case. And that's still the case. But yeah, I think I had a client as fractional CRO in 2023 after I left Chargebee. And it was still early days for the application of AI, right? We kind of saw it coming, but it was still very human led. And then I took about a year trying to build a new startup that didn't work out at the time. When I came back to doing CRO advising and now AI transformation advising, the market had totally changed. And so tools like Clay, Unified practically didn't exist or weren't, really on the radar then, are now like ubiquitous. What I think is interesting about the Chargebee example and the AI example is that actually having a company based out of India, we had what is commonly called a labor arbitrage, whereas like the cost of labor in India is lower than the cost of labor in the US. And so we were able to put more people at a sales problem than our competitors who were US based could do. So for example, as you know, we had LDRs, lead development representatives, and these were humans. We already had automated lead enrichment at the time, but it wasn't very good. And so you would have this human layer that could come on top of your leads coming in or your account lists and add all this context. And what's interesting is that that role can largely be filled now with AI, right? Like the LDR role that we were already using is now much easier to automate. The harder, and the other thing we would use the LDRs for is, for example, chatting on the website. So instead of having the support team handle sales chats, we had sales team handle sales chats. That was one of our best converting channels. And now we have a number of AI chats that help you do that in a more automated fashion. I still think it's a little early days. Like I still think a human can outperform, especially at the sales level, maybe not at a support L1 level. At a sales level, I think a human can understand context a little faster than the AI still, but we're not very far away.
I totally went down the memory lane because I saw all of that happening. Some of that happening because I joined like mid with Ray when some of that was already in motion. And I remember you and I having those discussions back in the day that let's have more people. And because at that time, since there was no technology, adding more people was the only way to scale that. But you joined, when we had when in charge we had 3 salespeople. Tell me, what was the first big bet you made at that time? When you realized, okay, now is the time to scale, and this is what I'm going to do.
We were right around product market fit at that point when I joined. It was maybe just a little before, but we were right around. And so obviously the motion to get to the couple $100,000 of ARR when I joined pre-product market fit and the motion after product market fit were going to be very different. And when I came in, what I realized is we were still in a validation mode where we would accept anybody who wanted to try the product at almost any price. And we largely competed on price. And I think that the challenge was shifting us to a value sale to say like, as a billing solution, people need trust. You don't really want the cheapest billing solution. You want the best billing solution. And so how did we change our messaging from we are the most affordable to we are the most valuable? And that was one of the first big changes that we put in place. The other thing, obviously, was that we didn't really have any systematic process, right? Nothing was really being tracked in the CRM. We had Salesforce, which at the time was a little over-engineered for what the size that we were at. So we ended up moving over to Freshsales as they were an early product. And that actually helped us simplify a little bit of the interface because the risk when you have so much, and this is one of the challenges we can talk about with AI, but when there's so much possibility, when it's so easy to do something, you like chase that optimization, you need to balance the level of optimization that you have with your stage of growth. So it is normal that pre-product market fit, you're not fully optimized. Then post-product market fit, you're trying to get into scale, you optimize a little bit more, but you don't really need, the metaphor I used it before in a talk was, you don't need a Ferrari when you're just learning how to drive. And, it's probably better to have a Toyota and then, you like scale up. And then once you become a really good driver, then you're ready for the Ferrari. And, the Ferrari has higher performance than the Toyota. But if you do anything wrong with it, like the variability on error is much higher than it is on the Toyota. The Toyota is much more forgiving. And so as you scale, you need an adaptable tool, not just like the high performance machine.
I love that example. While you increase value scale, the ultimate Chargebee, you also increase the average selling price by 30x. That's not a tweak. That's a complete different business. I love to know, how did you do it?
Yeah, well, I mean, the first thing, again, I was doing this for the first time. I'd never done, and thankfully one of
and
the
you did a
things
good
that
job. So yeah.
Yeah, it worked out. But one of the things that's great about sales is, and the revenue function in general, is that you don't get any points for creativity. You just get points for hitting the number. And it is a largely documented function. Or people like yourself who are putting out a bunch of really good content, you can learn and read. And what I realized was that when I joined, our ASP, our average sales price, was $850 a year. And when you do the math of how many customers you need to get at $850 a year to get to 100 million in revenue. I remember going into a meeting with the founders, a strategy meeting, and drawing on the whiteboard a graph that was kind of the mouse, the deer, the elephant view of like how you're hunting customers, and showing them that like right now we were at the mouse and like the number of customers. And I said this, like, there's only one way to do this, which is to go up market. Like we need to. Interesting thing happens first when you start to increase price, especially in a category like billing, which is not a nice to have, but a need to have, and like a systems critical solution. There's a thing called the inelasticity of price. So actually, as we increase prices, demand increased, which you would assume demand would decrease. But actually, we were at one point so cheap, basically, on our pricing that we were not credible. And as soon as you increase the price, then you become credible because people have this referential in which they put you compared to the market. And if you're so far priced out, they have to assume something's wrong with what you're doing. It's like if go back to the car analogy, if I said I have a car that's as good as a Ferrari, but I priced it like a Toyota, people would rightly be skeptical. And so we started to increase price just as a factor of a need to grow the business and to stimulate demand. And then what happened is we found product market fit. And we realized that as a mission critical system, as we're able to grow with our customers, we actually have a right to have a bigger share of wallet in the payment stack as we deliver more and more value. So I think as the product evolved, we managed to find ways to increase. The next big unlock was we believed at the time when we started that pricing should be on an invoice basis. So regardless of the invoice value, whether it's a $10 invoice or a $100,000 invoice, the customer should pay the same because the work for us is relatively the same. The challenge is that everybody in the competitive landscape priced based on revenue. And so while we may have had the more just pricing, we had then in our sales cycle, we were educating customers on our model and why it was different from the competitive landscape. At that point, unless you have a model that is super simple and differentiated, you're really wasting cycles in your sales cycle when you need to educate on how you price. So rather than trying to bring our customers to the way that we thought this should be priced, we went to the way that they expected it to be priced and priced on revenue. And it turns out for NRR, revenue was a great metric on which to price because as our customers grew, we could grow with them, right? And so all of a sudden we got this 130% NRR unlock because our customers were growing. Everything, whenever they were up and to the right, we went up and to the right with them mechanically because we were based on revenue. Plus, our sales cycles went down because we didn't have to educate on the model, and our conversion rates went up because we weren't, losing customers who were skeptical again about us standing out on a model. So it was like a win-win-win on the pricing model factor. And the last thing I would say on this, iterate on your pricing, right? So it's sort of every 6 months, at least, maybe more frequently in the early stages, you should have some iteration or test on your pricing, not do a whole repricing, but pricing is dynamic, right? And the market changes, your product changes, expectations change. Right now we're going, because of this kind of tokenomics world that we live in with AI, there seems to be kind of a barbell of expectations. One is the equivalent of ChatGPT or Anthropic $20 a month, kind of unlimited but throttled model. The other one is the same model, same people, but the API model, where all of a sudden you're paying big bucks, and where all of us as consumers went from paying very little to our subscriptions to now, I don't know, I probably pay a few $1,000s a year to these providers just because of the work I'm doing with them. And I would have never expected that a couple of years ago. So there's been a shift. And so people should be adapting their pricing to that shift.
Wow, there's a lot to unpack here. I'll go back to when you said, how your competitors were charging by the revenue. And even though Chargebee had a simpler model of charging the same amount irrespective of the invoices, you're saying the customer still expected to be paid based on revenue.
Customers come with an expectation of what, first, when you're a systems critical solution, there will be an evaluation against competitors, right? You don't pick a billing solution without speaking to 2 or 3 different providers. And all of a sudden, if 3 of the people you spoke to are pricing one way and one of them is pricing differently, you think, well, what's wrong? What's different? What am I missing? For some reason, the human bias that we tend to have goes to, if the majority is doing this thing and the minority is doing this thing, then the minority must be somehow mistaken, or something is wrong. Our bias is to the intelligence of the herd or the hive mind. Now that leads us astray sometimes. For us, that was, it's kind of like if you imagine that, I don't know, what would be like a very different model, like a restaurant instead of charging you each time you go your bill, they said, hey, here's a subscription and you can come and you can eat anything you want. And I'm sure somebody's tried it, but actually like people aren't, they're going to think, what's the got you on that? What's the restaurant doing? Is the quality of the food going to go down because there's too much demand? Like, something like that.
Got it. Let's say if you were building Chargebee's GTM from scratch today, knowing what you know and knowing the whole AI, what will look different?
Yeah, that's a great question. Everything that is at the very top of the funnel or top of the workflow, but not even the funnel, but at the top of the workflow in sales, that is, how do we build lists? How do we understand who ideal customers are? How do we find who they are? All that has become much, much better. And so clearly you would look at Unify, Claude, Apollo is still good. There's like a number of them. Ample Market also does good work on this. Like there's a number of them that will help you at this area of like better understanding who you should target. Then you get into the phase of like what you send them. And I still feel that AI, unless very well coached and boxed in, is like I can tell when I get a message that has been written by AI. One of the tells that is kind of easy to fix is the length of the message. Like nobody used to write these long, you see it on social, like you go on LinkedIn and everybody's writing 500-word essays. There's no way we're all writing 500 essays a week. Like, and the irony is nobody's reading, right? Because they're just too long. And so we don't have time. Who can keep up? So I think that I would be very careful of the risk. The token machine wants to output tokens. And so it will try to be long and verbose. And we need to rein that in to be short and to the point. The next thing is high automation at the top. And then on the outreach part, my assumption is that until we get agents who are buying, which doesn't yet happen very much. A customer that is looking for a solution doesn't yet have its prospecting agent that goes out, like goes and finds, its procurement agent really doesn't exist yet. I assume we'll see those start to happen. I don't know about this year or next year, but I assume we'll see those happen. That's not really happening. So it's still human buyers and they can be assisted by AI and compare this solution to this solution, but it's still human. And I think but we do have agents doing the SDR work. And I think what's happening is they are polluting, or they have polluted, the email and to some extent the social channels. So LinkedIn has done a reasonable job of keeping the bots out. And so LinkedIn is still a pretty good channel for outreach. Email, I think, is like almost dead. It's just like nobody reads it. There's too much going. Voice is actually still quite good. Why? Because it's like and text, because it's so regulated on the robocall. And as long as we keep throttling or limiting the ability of robocallers, then human callers will still have an advantage. So if I were looking at the Chargebee team today, I would say, look, let's use a lot of AI to build our lists. We need to do some touch points over email. We can do those automatically, whether they work or not, fine. It doesn't cost a lot to do that. Let's do some AI assisted LinkedIn, and then let's call people and let's just like hit the phones. And I really think that is still the differentiator right now when you want to reach people is voice.
100% agreed with that. In fact, that's a kind of shift we are seeing with a lot of companies. In fact, most of the companies who are building today and thinking about even adding the top of the funnel, most want SDRs to simply be on the phones as much as they can. And of course, that is where AI assisted list with signals comes in. In fact, I spoke to a founder based in UK recently. He built something internally for his team, and that is commendable because now his SDR logs in. He knows these are the 50 accounts I have to hit. These are the 500 prospects I have to hit for this week. The system also generates a comment for a post, let's say written by Germain, so that he doesn't even have to think about what do I even comment, because a lot of SDRs are, let's say, paralyzed when it comes to that. And every single action has been dictated by AI. So the SDR job is to just pick the phone, even if the time is decided. This is the time when you have to call, so that you can maximize the chances of getting them on the phone. So I think that's a brilliant system, and I think I can totally see how you don't need an army of people, because nobody's hiring LDRs anymore. I think nobody's hiring anybody for research anymore. Unify kind of solve that problem. So brilliant. Tell me, since you are talking a lot about AI in the last few years, Germain, where have you seen that AI is completely failing? And what are some of the failure modes people are not talking about?
Yeah. So I mean, the space moves very quickly, right? So the last year, 2025, we realized that there was a lack of harness on agents. And so we'd have these things that would go off and they'd just kind of go off on their own, and they'd go rogue and make a lot of mistakes. I think we've figured out a lot of the harness techniques in the past few quarters. And so the agents are a little better behaved. I still think that there's a challenge with context and memory, right? Like to an agent, it's sort of like to a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And, to an agent, when you set it on a task, everything, it just like focuses on that task. And if it sees something that is like slight, it won't really notice it or pick it up, or it will overemphasize. So I think the way that I think about these right now, where we're at, and I know this isn't like everybody's talking about it, we already have AGI or we don't have AGI or whatever. I don't think that we do in my view. And I think that really when I look at where we're at with AI is that it is currently a productivity tool where human curation and human taste still remain largely important. And I see this when I work with some of the founders I support on the AI transformation piece. And you can tell the teams that will put something into one of the LLMs, get an output that is a very long output, and just forward it to you as is without reading it, understanding it, criticizing it, curating it. And so then what you get is you end up with these humans who are just control copy, control paste, AI content back and forth. And it's really the LLMs having a conversation, but they get entropy, like the further they go along, the AIs together, like the worse they kind of get. And I think we're seeing new techniques right now. Kind of auto research is one of the techniques that I think will come in, where there's a kind of a supervising agent that comes in and will clear things up. But basically, we talk about Pareto efficiency, like the 80-20 rule, right? Like 80% of their work gets done with 20% of the effort, and then the remaining 20% of the work takes 80% of the effort. I think with AI, that becomes like 90-10 or 95-10, which means like you can start, it's so easy to go from zero to, call it POC, right? Like a zero to something that looks like something. And it's like, wow, that's super exciting, right? Reason. And then that last mile is actually super hard. And I think that the difference in talent for humans comes into who are the people who know how to focus on that last mile, how to work on that last mile to really craft the AI into a strategy, and who are the people who are just copying and pasting. And I think that's where the difference makes. So I still think there's a last mile issue with a lot of the AI. I also think, I mean, to your point on voice, like they can make it sound, I have an OpenClaw assistant, and it has whatever voice capabilities. So I can have it call me and, we can have a conversation. The, voice system they use has some like fake keyboard sounds in the background, some fake noise in the background to make it seem like, but like it still somehow feels fake, rings fake. And then when I ask I say her because I named her Samantha, like the AI in the film Her. There's just kind of a on the, yeah. But I'm not developing a relationship with my OpenClaw agent. I'm happily married to a human. It's very good. But there are some simple tasks that you can ask where you trip them up. Look, like an LLM is largely a prediction machine, right? And a prediction machine necessarily gravitates around the mean by definition, right? Like it doesn't do the distribution on the edges very well. And you can kind of push it there, but then it gets increasingly uncomfortable. And so when you're drafting an email, for example, it will push to the mean email more often than not, right? It will give you the standardized, and when you want to do something that's a little bit different, it will try to bring you back to the mean. It will criticize it and try to bring it back to the mean because that's what it's trained on. And I think that the human craft is in starting from that mean and getting that mean to an edge of excellence, right? And I think that's where we all have to learn how to use it as a tool. Now, when we get to AGI, where the AIs learn on their own, they can do that, then like all this will change. I don't know how far we are from that. I have an assumption that LLM architecture will not get us there. It is a contentious assumption in the Valley, but I think we need some kind of different architecture that will actually get us to AGI in addition to a prediction engine.
Quite interesting, because I met a founder recently who's building something on the side, but he works for a huge insurance company in the US, pretty young guy. And what he built on the side, what he built for the insurance tech, I mean, of course, the capabilities he's building on the voice end is for the inbound and not for the outbound. And of course, there's a legality on that. But what he showed me literally blew my mind, because when you are talking to that agent, you will not be able to figure out that it's actually an AI. Depending on where you're calling from, they will detect your location. So if you're calling from California, you will be actually speaking to a Cali girl versus a Texan girl and so on. So they have actually done it to a level where it's impossibly insane. What do you think about, let's say, this becoming legalized at one point of time? I know there are other implications where, outbound is, let's say, done by an AI completely.
We will get better, first of all, at detecting AIs than before. Like I think my son is 3.5 and he will grow up with this and have a better ear towards what sounds fake and what sounds real. I think we will need solutions also that can prove or demonstrate that something or someone is human or an AI. Talk about proof of personhood or things like that. So I think we'll need some of that infrastructure. I do think that we will get very good. And also, like, even if we don't get very good, I think our acceptability of talking to an AI will go up. So like, it's kind of like, why do I care that it's a human calling me as long as the thing can answer my questions and get the job done, right? And so you call a service and it used to be press 1 for this, press 2 for this, press 3 for this. And then it would say, you can say 1, you can say 2, you can say 3. And when those first came out, they were actually quite bad at recognizing if you said 1 with a bit of an accent or you mumbled it, like it wouldn't get it. I didn't get that, start over. And then it reads the whole thing. That's a very bad human experience. Now, if we get to the point where, and I think we're almost there, where we can interrupt these things, where they can understand that, I don't know, if I say 1 in a different way, if I say uno or instead of 1, and we'll still understand it. And it understands intent, not just like the first version of these were basically code and they were hard coded. So you had to fit one of these parameters. Now, one of the advantages of AI is the response in the conversation doesn't have to be hard coded. It can use interpretation. And as soon as they get to understanding interpretation and intent, then I may prefer to speak to an AI when evaluating a product, because the AI will not tell me the way an SDR tells me when I ask a technical question, hey, I need to speak to my sales engineer or my solutions engineer to be able to answer your question. The AI will be able to answer my question. And so in a certain sense, the customer experience will get better as long as our acceptability of not talking to a human passes the test. I'll say one more thing on this. I think that one of my hot takes, one of the big lies of the SaaS era was that it brought productivity. And I think really what it did for the most part is it delegated work from vendors to customers. So customers did the evaluations, customers did their integration, customers did their own setup and parameters, customers do their own QA. All this stuff that used to be done as a service when software first started, the cloud enabled it to be delegated actually to the customer, and we removed the service from it. So it's like, it's not software as a service, it's do your own work, customer, figure out your own, evaluate your own. And I think that that's not a very popular take in the world of SaaS. And I have a lot of respect for what SaaS did otherwise. I just think we need to be clairvoyant on what it did to productivity, which is when you're checking in your own bags at the airport, you're not actually increasing the overall productivity of the experience. You're increasing the airline company's productivity, but not yours. And now what I think AI can do is it can start to bring service back into PLG motions, back into software. And so you can bring in a layer of AI service on top of your product offering that actually removes work from the customer. So instead of saying, hey, look, I need to understand, does this product fit with my stack? And so I go on the website and I look at the integration page and I look at this and I maybe talk to somebody on their team, but ultimately I've got to do the work myself. I could say to their procurement agent, this is my website. Tell me what the integration points are. What am I missing? What are some of the areas or some of my workflows that you can do? And it should be able to give us a whole plan on the integration, kind of in an automated fashion. And I don't think we're quite there yet, but I think that's where we're going. So I'm hopeful that AI brings service back, and I'm hopeful that acceptability of working with AI increases. I don't think it is helpful to act as if an AI is human. Like I think we live in a better world when we can differentiate between the AI and the human.
Wow, so many wonderful analogies. I'm definitely gonna use some of them in different conversations. We've been talking about AI agents for a while, but I'm not sure if everybody understands the AI agents maybe like the way everybody who's technically sound does. So can we maybe explain to our audience in layman terms, what does AI agent mean in the context of, let's say, GTM?
Yeah. So let's start with an AI agent is basically two things. It is a LLM plus code. And so an LLM is a tool where you give it a question and it gives you an answer. And what you need with an agent is you need to be able to set it on a path to not just give you an answer, but obtain a result. So when you combine, what we found is that when you combine the LLM software, traditional software, right? Like if this, then that with the LLM, all of a sudden we're able to get these things to take actions on our behalf. They're not just record players putting out tokens. They are now all of a sudden actors in the world because these codes enable them to use tools. And so it can go do research, it can go click on a button, it can, et cetera. So when we talk about agents, we're really talking about LLMs combined with traditional software code that results in activity generation rather than just token generation. And so we're really thinking about, we talk about agency for humans and agency as the ability to do things. And so this is what's exciting about these, is that there is a future that is not too far away where instead of doing my own evaluation for CRMs and hunting on G2 Crowd for what are the best new CRMs, et cetera, for SMBs doing SaaS, I could plug into an agent, and maybe it's a G2 agent, and just say, here's my website, tell me what the best 3 CRMs are for what I'm doing, ask me some questions, qualify me for them, and then make a recommendation. And the agents will be good at doing that kind of stuff. Like you should be able to send out an agent pretty in short term to hunt for a CRM solution for you, or whatever marketing automation solution you want. I think that's hopefully a little clearer.
Yeah, you literally explained what I'm probably doing right now when I'm evaluating a couple of solutions. So I built a whole Claude skill, in fact, for evaluating different solutions. And I think adding on to what you said, I think an interesting use case is not just looking at this at the surface level, but by going to use the co-work feature and literally scan all the reviews and say that, hey, you know what? I don't want any solution which has, let's say, mention of this particular feature not working more than 5 times. I mean, you can even go with that granular. So I think it is going to become insanely difficult and insanely easy to actually, I don't know, sell in the world. I'm not sure.
Yeah. What I tried to do at the beginning of this, so I don't know if you know Replit.
I do.
Replit is Claude Code is great. If anybody out there is thinking about, I have no association with Replit. I just, so I'm just saying this, but if anybody out there is not technical and is wondering how to start building these things like what you're doing, Cowork can help. I think Replit is another great option because it's kind of the full stack from prompt to deployment of a solution. And they just put out a post a couple of days ago that I thought was relevant to our conversation, which is, you think of Replit as a vibe coding platform, basically. But they just put out a post that says, we will build your SDR agent. That's interesting that they're going into that. So they have these templates and you can go in and build based on a template. And so just before we started talking, I had it go in and build, an outreach strategy. And actually my full workflow was, I went to Claude and I said, hey, I'm trying to get in touch with companies that are looking to transform their business with AI, both at a product level and a GTM level. How can they bring AI into their workflows? And build me an outbound plan for that. So Claude put together a plan and built that, and this is like the general plan of how I'm going to figure out my ICP was quite good. Again, when it put together the content calendar, I thought it smelled heavily of AI slop. And while I will be putting out content, I will not be taking its content calendar recommendations because I think it lacks personality. But anyways, I took this plan made by Claude. I then plugged it into Replit using its SDR template. And I said, now build me a full end-to-end workflow for this outreach strategy. And in the time we've been talking, just some 30, 40 minutes, it built it. And now I've got a dashboard, a pipeline view. I can import prospects from Sales Navigator or Clay. I've got templates for responses. And I think that everybody who's listening out there, whether you're an IC or a manager, needs to start playing with these things because this capability of saying, I have a need, I'm going to just build it is very new, is very empowering. And again, the last mile is a little complicated, but that's why I think Replit is good. It makes it pretty easy to deploy these things. Another example that I think, look, we talked about LinkedIn as a good tool. One of the challenges on LinkedIn is obviously the noise. And how do you get to signal on LinkedIn? An idea that one of my, what do they call it? Mastermind partners or whatever, so a friend basically had was how would I know if somebody is live or active on LinkedIn? And so the green dot, right? Like you see this little green dot on LinkedIn and how do I track a green dot? And so I built very quickly a Chrome extension that pulls my LinkedIn Sales Navigator list. And whenever somebody comes online from that list, I get a pop-up in my window that tells me so-and-so is
Wow.
online. And
You built that
that's when
using Replit?
this one I built using, so I've played with a number of the tools. I think this one I built actually using Claude, but not even Claude code, just standard Claude built this. Claude can put out little apps. Yeah. And I'm happy to, like, I can, if there's a way that you think it's useful to share it or to package it with
Yes,
we can put it out. That's not a problem.
absolutely. I think it has the potential to hit number one. Everybody wants
Okay, all
this.
right. Yeah. Okay. Well, let's do that. We'll take that as an action item. But yeah, you can just do things, right? And I think that's that's the message. And I think again, I would start with Replit or Lovable is pretty good as well as these starting points if you really have no technical experience.
Yeah, I think I have subscription to all three, and I keep switching between Claude and Replit. I mean, at one point of time, Replit was way ahead, and I believe there are a few things you can do on Lovable easily. But yes, I think Replit can do a lot more things which Lovable and Claude cannot do to the same. And I think even I love their GTM, the way they run their whole motion. They keep on running these webinars every week, and I keep on missing it. And then there's a FOMO. I think for me, the biggest challenge is how do you keep away from all of this? Because every day I think of sleeping at 10 and I end up sleeping by 2 because, it's so addicting that, you can't just spin it. You can't just stop. I'm right now building I think 6 micro SaaS at one point of time because they're so addicting and I can run all of them in parallel, launch all of them, decide in 1 month, which one is going to work and, just build on it. It's crazy, seriously.
So this is super. I had a kind of a message I put out on, I think, LinkedIn and X recently, which was when social media first came out, it made us all think we were being social. And I wonder whether we're in that phase of the token world where these tokens make us feel we're productive, but actually we're all just generating a bunch of prototypes that very few actually make it to market. And so, but it is very addictive. I can empathize with that. And you'll have 3 screens open in parallel of coding at things in parallel and you're getting it. And then for me, I hit a point midnight or 1 a.m. where I start to get confused as to which one is doing what. And it's blurry and who, and then I got to shut it down. So I agree it's addictive. I think it can be a little deceiving in terms of, if you don't have a clear idea of what you're doing and if you're not very disciplined because you can feel like you're being productive and you're just spinning wheels in these coding agents. But I think we'll learn how to work with it. It is a very exciting time. And if you're not playing with these tools, then you're going to be the generation of our parents when they first discovered Facebook or social and it's just you gotta keep up. But I think you're right. You have to be disciplined as to when you stop. Look, ideas have always been cheap, right? Super easy to wake up in the morning and have an idea. Now what's dangerous is that you don't only have it, but you have a thing that can get you 80% of the way there, 90% of the way there. If you take the 90-10 example I was talking about earlier, the challenge is that last mile. And you wake up on Monday, you have an idea for a little LinkedIn plugin. You wake up on Tuesday, you have an idea for, and so the challenge is bringing these things across the line and actually getting them out into the market, right? And I think that's the discipline. And I'm getting better at it now. I was really bad at it for a few months. I was just kind of anything I thought of, I would start building. And now I sat down actually at the beginning of this quarter and said, okay, which of the 15 projects that I started do I actually believe in and care about? These are the 3. And it helps me when I get tempted to just remember, okay, I said these are the 3, so I'm going to focus on these 3. I think that's one of the risks and challenges right now.
I can't disagree. I had one of the RevOps guy on my podcast recently who created a tool, complete tool, which he's selling. And I think that is my inspiration that, how do I reach that level? And I think I'm 90% there where I can launch a tool and I think I have that audience whom I can sell to. I think the best part is what used to really take so long earlier is, hey, how do I validate my product? And now I can just validate that before even building that product. I have some hypothesis I can build quickly with Replit, with scraping all what people are really asking on LinkedIn or other social media platform, which was not possible. I built a 17,000 Instagram following in 2 months just using Claude. And that was not possible. And I was trying that for 5 years. And that's how I know for a fact that it has insane potential. There's a guy I follow on, who just talks about Claude. And in fact, he has got 50,000 followers in 1 month. But your point is right. It's so addictive that, you don't know where to stop. You have to have the discipline. And while everything is at your disposal, still a lot of people are not able to do it. And I think the discipline is the reason why.
Yeah, I think that's what you mentioned about that guy is super interesting, because what did he do? He found one thing, which is Claude, and it's a big thing. Like, it's good. There's room in that space, and it's just Claude. And so that's the discipline. That's the follow through. That's the consistency, where all his effort goes to, does it fit into my Claude branding or my Claude messaging or whatever? And if not, it's outside. I don't know who the guy is, but that's what I aspire to, which is just like, I've got to keep that track and put blinders on to all the other world of possible. Like, the problem is with FOMO and the shiny new object syndrome and these types of things, right? So you have clearly developed a voice over the past few years, and I've watched you do it, and you've been very successful in the SDR sales development area. Maybe one day you want to change, but if you take this right now and you say, okay, well, I'm going to talk a lot about product development. I'm just picking a very different thing. And I'm going to talk about, because I'm using Replit product development. And then, you're going to squander some of the ability to build on your past successes, right? So I think that focus on that discipline is really important. And as you mentioned, the person from RevOps, you said he built one tool. Like, he didn't build 10 tools. He built one tool, and he has, a platform and a voice, and he can push that one tool, right? So I think that's the game right now, is the discipline.
Absolutely. And for my Instagram, I actually did not attract the same SDR audience. I built a different audience altogether. So I happened to record like one, and this was like very crazy. I kind of recorded a video where I was coaching one of my students on something altogether, where it was simple as, hey, how do you introduce yourself in an interview? And that video kind of went viral. And after that, I simply asked Claude to repeat the whole process. I found everybody who was talking videos on Instagram and everywhere, found all the mistakes, started talking about those mistakes. So Claude has made my entire plan for the next 3 months, including all the lead magnets, including all the automation. And this was literally done over the Sunday. So I had the content ready for 3 months. And I think in 3 months, I'll probably hit 50,000. And I don't think so this was possible before. Humanly, it's not possible.
Yeah, I think that's right. My wife works for one of the AI labs, and she does brand strategy and story, and she is super talented. And she says that the pace at which we have to now produce has increased so much that you're right that these things weren't possible, but now it's actually table stakes to be able to move that fast.
Yes.
The old world of the person just doing their own content calendar on their own slowly, but like, that person will not win until we get back, maybe, to whatever the Etsy is of content. Like, this is human only content, right? Like, you have like certified organic, and it's like certified human. And maybe that content will have a different audience and a little bit more patience. But I think today you cannot not use these tools if you want to be successful. It is amazing. What's cool about what you did, Raul, is that you experimented, you came out with a thing that you probably weren't thinking of as building a persona around, and this one hit. And so you're able to work on an audience. Now, as you get successful with that, and then you're going to have the SDR and then the interview thing, either you're able to manage both in parallel, and maybe that's now possible with AI, or there's going to have to be something that gives at some point, because it's hard to have 5 personas in the wild that you're defending, right?
It just kind of happened organically, because now my School of Interviews is kind of feeding into my pipeline for School of SDR, and School of SDR is going to feed into the pipeline of something else I'm building, which I'm launching next month. So it just kind of happened organically. Yeah.
Well, I think, if you think of it that way, right, how it stacks, then it makes sense. If you have to deal with them in silos, then it gets, at least for me, like, the cognitive load is very hard to deal with, like, pure silos. And, you can only have so many, if you're using your own face or and likeness, you can only have so many versions of yourself online.
Yep.
If you start talking about different margaritas on that same Instagram, you'll win some new people, but you may lose the following that you've gotten on the internet.
Yep. Germain, this has been fantastic. I know we are right on time. I will just ask you one last question, okay? This has been something which I've been wondering. It's a lightning round, okay? Only 2 questions, and you don't have more than 2 seconds to think about it.
Lightning round, I can't think more than 2 seconds. All right, Raul,
Yes.
I trust you. Let's do this.
All right. What's the best GTM tool you're using right now most people do not know about?
Well, I think it's my browser extension for who is live on LinkedIn.
Wow. We got to have this. While we're releasing the podcast, we're definitely going to send it to everybody. All right, next question. You went from a war zone hospital to Silicon Valley boardrooms. What are two principles that carried you through all of it?
The minority sets the tone. So in a group dynamic, if you have two people who are detractors and who are huff and puff about everything, they will bring the whole group down. If you have two people who are positive, kind of jokesters, these funny people, they will bring everybody up. And so it is really important, both in the boardroom, the company, and in the war zone hospital, to make sure that the detractors are isolated and sometimes removed, and that you have fans coming in and bringing everybody up, right? The group dynamic kind of tends to follow this outside personalities on either the positive or the negative.
If I'm a VP of sales listening to this and I want to figure out a way to apply AI in my GTM, what's step one?
Ask Claude.
Wow.
Yeah, I think step one is start using these tools, right? Just start playing around. There's like really no cost to just starting to put things in, and think about what you wish you had. Anytime you're in a meeting and you're in a pipeline review and something isn't showing up the way that you want it to show up or something like that, then just think about, all right, if I put it in a prompt in Replit, can I get a better version of this? And you'll start to see how it can just start to improve your own workflows.
I like that. Build something you wish you had. Last question. With all this automation, what human skills become more valuable and not less?
I think it's curation. Right. I think it is the craft of knowing how to synthesize, isolate information and sort of curate for what is relevant, because I think the volume of noise increases with these tokens. And so it is the ability to take signal out of noise that I think is that. And maybe there's a second part that we talked about that is relevant. It's that last mile. Right. Can you have the discipline? You have this plan for 3 months on the kind of the content plan on the interviewer, stick with that plan, deliver it for 3 months. There will be troughs in that plan. There will be moments where it's not working, where you're not climbing to your 50,000 goal, but you gotta stick through it. And I think that consistency is another human skill that is more valuable now than before.
Wow. Amazing. Thank you so much, Germain, for being on the show. Could not have expected a better guest.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it. Great to see you again. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.